Jess said she thought it was canceled.
Welcome to the September Instructional Committee meeting. We are here tonight to look at a presentation on homelessness in the Concord School District Services departments. And with us tonight, we have Board Member Kara Meeker, myself, Brenda Hastings, Assistant Superintendents Kimberly Yarlott and John Fabrizio. And we have from the high school? No.
I'm from the high school.
You're from the high school. And what was your name? I'm sorry.
Melissa Piccini.
Melissa Piccini and
Erin Kerr.
Erin Kerr. Okay. Thank you both for coming tonight. We really appreciate you
for
taking some
having
time and coming to us and talking to us about this important issue.
Okay.
I'm going to turn it over to John.
Sure.
So, just a little quick, I'm not gonna steal too much thunder, so I'll just say that, a few years back, really, we brought, Erin's position as the coordinator of early childhood services and, in charge of homelessness, that our students experience. We brought that role into, student services to give it more of a, collective approach to working with the whole child. She sits daily next to our coordinator of our programs and our director of student staff wellness, and myself and Dawn Seeley, and we all sit together and kind of it helps when a student maybe experiencing homelessness, that we can kind of talk about it together and have a nice think tank around it and be able to look at the way we identify and making sure we're following all the rules and the laws that are out there around that. So I'll leave it there, and I will turn to Erin and Melissa and let them present their information.
So good evening. Thank you for inviting us to speak with you. As John said, my name is Erin Kerr. I am the coordinator of Early Supports and Family Engagement, and I oversee our Concord Family Center, as well as the Concord School District Homeless Coordinator. My work as the homeless coordinator has allowed for streamlined process and protocols, as well as structures that help support our most vulnerable students and their families. This work, although challenging and emotionally taxing at times, learning of the circumstances that our children in this city face day in and day out, and the work done by the outstanding team that I am honored to support. Here with me tonight is Melissa Piccini, the adjustment counselor and McKinney-Vento liaison for Concord High School. Our other team members are, although here in spirit, I would be remiss not to share and publicly thank them for their tireless work. Jenny Fennelly, the home to school liaison at Millbrook School. Andrea Canny, social worker at Beaver Meadow. Stacy Lazar, school social worker at Abbott Downing and Krista McAuliffe. Ruth Christino, our home to school liaison at Broken Ground. And Haley Lincoln, our school social worker at Runlet. Together, the 7 of us have worked hard to ensure access to area agencies, mental health providers, community partners for housing and food access, as well as serving as a champion for these children and their families with their individual student school teams. Tonight, we plan to share with you the laws that we are very well-rounded in, and all the work that goes into supporting the children of Concord School District in order to access their education. So, I'll hand this off.
Awesome.
I'm so sorry of the layout. Is there a present mode in this? I don't want to screw anything up. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
It's just.
So
Technology is, the bane of our existence.
It really is.
I do apologize.
Right. Sometimes I feel like you can collapse the left column,
Can't. Okay.
but maybe in the upper left.
No, okay. Oh,
It works.
That's right. We like it. We can read it. So, who are McKinney and who are Vento? So, these were people that supported this act, and it actually was enacted under Reagan. And the spirit of it is to ensure immediate enrollment for students who are experiencing homelessness and any sort of transitional living situation that is obviously was not a choice, and to prevent the unnecessary disruption of their school instruction. So one of the things what the Homeless Act protects for them is their right to stay in the same school of origin, even if they are forced out of the district by eviction or some other circumstance. So our role is really to work to identify these students. So part of that is training faculty in the beginning of the year, you know, the people that are working one-on-one with these kids, the people that are hearing, you know, overhearing if someone say, I slept in mommy's car last night, and those are the people that sort of help us identify these students. And we have a number of other data points that we look at to identify them. As I said, immediate enrollment, so typically to register a student, you need a birth certificate, and immunizations, and school records.
Proof of residency.
Proof of residency, that's a big one. So as soon as a student is identified as McKinney-Vento eligible, they can start right away. And then we, after the fact, the social workers will work to get all that documentation in place, but they don't have to have it to start. So it also enables them to have full participation in sports and extracurricular activities. So if they're a soccer player and they can't afford cleats, that is something we can support them with by getting them some cleats, or if there's a uniform fee or anything like that. We're going to talk a little bit later, I think, about best interest and school choice. Transportation is a huge part of the work we do, the coordination we do. You know, we thankfully have a transportation department, but even so, it's a challenge to find drivers and vehicles to get these students to school. So, for example, a student was living in Concord, evicted, they're now in Deering. You know, to find somebody to go every day back and forth to pick up the student, it, you know, sometimes can take longer than we'd like it to, but that's the reality. If we're not able to, then, and the parent is willing and able to transport their student to and from Concord for school, then we do offer a mileage reimbursement for them, which is much less expensive than if we have to provide transportation. The other thing is, right off the bat, as soon as the student's identified with Erin, she lets food services know, and that very day these students are able to get free breakfast and lunch. So they are, you know, more present and ready to learn when they have obviously been fed in the morning.
So Melissa briefly talked about, you know, the eligibility that goes into, you know, finding these families eligible for the support and services through the McKinney-Vento Act. Homelessness is defined as the lack of a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. There are a lot of barriers that can come into this, and we are finding through our work, especially working with the Department of Ed, it is grossly underreported, the amount of students in the state as well in individual districts that could be considered eligible under McKinney-Vento who are doubled up. That seems to be a really big area of need for our families. But when we, the social worker team, when we're working with families, it's always comes down to, is it fixed, is it regular, is it adequate? We can't have 10 people in a one-bedroom house with one bathroom and they're all sharing, you know, the couch or whatever that living space is. And we all know that when children have those basic needs met, they've had a healthy meal, their tummy is full, they have warm clothes on their back, and they've had adequate sleep, they come to school ready to learn. And this is often our challenge is supporting these families and making sure that they have everything that they need so that their student does come to school at 7:30 or 8:30 for Runlet, ready to access the programming.
Sometimes people will say, why don't they just go to the homeless shelters? Well, Concord does have homeless shelters. Sorry,
the
microphone? Closer. Sorry. However, they're often full, especially during the winter when it's even more challenging. You know, sometimes unhoused families can get away with living in a camper or even a shed in someone's backyard for the summer. And then once the months get colder, you know, the shelters are typically full. So that is a barrier for them.
And one of the shelters that we work with pretty regularly was full as of August.
Yeah.
So it just shows the ever-growing need in the housing
Yeah, and
crisis.
even if there are rooms available or beds available, there can be barriers even to get into shelters. For example, some of them require you to be a married couple. You can't be an unmarried couple and stay in a room together. Some of them are only for men. Some of them are only for women and children. Some of them have curfews, or you have to be sober. And so those can present additional barriers to people. Also, if they've ever been asked to leave a shelter, they're kind of like on a blacklist, and they, shelters share that information, so they may never be able to get into a shelter again.
So another part of McKinney-Vento in looking at whether or not a student is homeless or not, we also, Melissa has it more, of the unaccompanied youth. So these are the older students that aren't in the physical custody of a parent or a guardian, but under this, they can still be found eligible through McKinney-Vento supports and services.
Yeah, I do see that a lot, and it's not a student who didn't want to follow mom and dad's rules, so they're living at their friend's house. This is a student who was forced to leave. Either the family was evicted and they didn't have room for that student to come with them, and so they stay with so and so for a while, or parents go to jail and there's no plan for the student. There's domestic violence in the home, or the child has been assaulted. So those are the students who would fall under, both being unaccompanied youth and a McKinney-Vento student, and have those same rights.
So Melissa mentioned before best interest. Those terms are often used a lot when we talk about McKinney-Vento and whether or not it makes sense for a family to remain here in Concord or attend a school. For an example, City Welfare is supporting a family in finding housing, and nothing is available in the Concord area. That student could be placed at a hotel in Manchester. We then, as a school team, and with the family, of course, talk about, what are those student-centered factors? Is the child connected to their school? Have they attended for a long time? Is transportation a barrier? What are the connections for that family within Concord, or does it make sense? So the best interests, the bids meetings happen quite often. I loop John in when we have those, just in case it comes to an appeal process. And I make sure that, when we're meeting with parents and with children, because the children's voice is really important in decisions like this, is that they know what their rights are, and if they disagree with a decision that came out of that bid meeting, I want to make sure that I support them in understanding the process of appeal and working with the state, and obviously working with John and Kathleen on that as well.
I'll just jump in there real quick. So this is where sometimes districts have to communicate with each other too, because there's a financial obligation to this. We all understand that, and we have to be responsible for that and understand where's the origin of the child. Are they homeless from Concord? Were they homeless from somewhere else? Or landed in Concord? What is the origin of where it is? And we get them in school right away. They come to school. But then after the kids are in school, we have all the services, and we have our wonderful people out there working with them. Sometimes it's on the phone with myself, and sometimes it involves superintendents, and Kathleen has to get involved just to kind of figure out who is the agent that is in charge of this family, and we have to do that because often it comes with a financial cost, and when we sometimes can't agree, we just split 50-50, and that's kind of that's what happens sometimes, and we just determine that, well, it's kind of fuzzy in the area and we're not real sure, but let's agree to just split the cost down the middle, and we do that sometimes to do that, but it's a continual. It's continually moving. I'll say that, and there's often is that a few times a year we're in these kind of conversations.
Yeah, and just as an aside to that, when one of the roles to the social workers in each individual school is if a student does move out of district and they are protected under McKinney-Vento, making sure that we connect with the McKinney-Vento liaison in that district, and not removing them from our system until we are certain that they've been enrolled. So that they are not slipping through the cracks.
So last year, our numbers, as I said, the DOE has put out information that the homeless counts across the state and in the nation are grossly underreported. But last year, I had a total of 113 individual students that qualified under McKinney-Vento for the Concord School District. The social workers, home to school liaisons have been fiercely completing needs assessments since the start of the school year as a means to ensure that we're identifying these families and pointing them in the right direction and getting them the support that they need to be successful. And I update those numbers every month for the board packet. And just more statistics that we always kind of keep in the back of our mind when we're doing this work. Is these kids and these families, their stories matter, and it's using their story and their impact to enhance that, like, just better themselves. And I just want to echo the work that Melissa and Haley, Andrea, Ruth, Jenny, Stacy, they all do tirelessly every single day. These families count on the work that they all do. So incredibly grateful and thankful.
They also, once a student has been determined to be McKinney-Vento, they remain so for the rest of that school year. So even if they find permanent stable housing, say in February, they can continue in Concord. And then we reevaluate or reassess at the beginning of the next school year.
Because
so it's not an automatic.
Because again, our goal is least disruptive
Yeah.
to their education and instruction. And why would we ever just tell a family, oh, you found permanent housing?
Right.
We really want to make sure that their send-off and the transition from Concord schools to
Right.
their next district is smooth and successful, and they leave with everything that they have. But I know that this is the instructional committee, and I want to make sure that our work with this is always to help them access the instruction that is provided every day.
Thank you very much. I mean, it is an incredibly difficult job, but incredibly important as well. And thank you for all you're doing. I know I have a few questions. I didn't know if anyone else had any questions at this time.
It's nice to have like a face to, the number of times I've heard McKinney-Vento and just not knowing really what it meant, 30 years in education. But no, I taught for several years at a local school here in Concord that no longer exists, but our homeless population was consistently large and varying and taking turns and all that sort of thing. And we were a small school, so we could be on top of a lot of those kids. We had a shower in the building. If they could get to school every day, we'd take care of all of it. And you were talking about sleeping in mom's car, and I have a distinct memory of a student getting a phone call. We had to give her a message, and so what she knew that we didn't know it meant was that she'd be sleeping in so-and-so's car tonight. And she was like, oh, I'm not going to get any sleep. Like, just her reaction was just so like, oh. And that was back in the day when you could take kids home with you for a few days until they were settled. I did a lot of that 25,
But I
30
think in
years ago.
hearing that situation, if that were to be today,
Right.
it would have been Melissa to get that phone call.
Right.
She would immediately alert me. I would let John know that there's a potential crisis at hand. And then Melissa would work with that student's school team. Listen,
Right.
so-and-so's coming in tomorrow. We're not sure where they would have slept,
Yep.
but I'm going to have breakfast ready to go.
And we were lucky because we were a small enough community that we were all on it. But you look at a big elementary school where you've got 3, 4, 5, 6 of each grade level and all that, those kids would just, and it affected them.
Yeah.
Erin, can you just talk a little more about some of the community partners? I know that Barb was leaning towards then it was just the teacher kind of did it, and that's kind of how we were. Now we live in a different world of a lot of community partners and meet with them often. So talk about your community
So I
wraparound.
mentioned part of the work in finding these families eligible is completing a needs assessment. And through that needs assessment, in the discussion with the family, we're seeing, all right, what is it that you need? You need clothing. You need food access. Melissa or myself, we're going to contact the county navigator with the family. We're going to connect them with the local food pantries that are set up. I have a map that has the times, the dates, all of that. And the family is really left there with an immense amount of support, connections, referrals have already been made.
Right.
And that's really the work that kind of helps close that loop of what else have we missed. So while our goal is always education and instruction, there's so much more that goes behind that piece that utilizing the community partners. I sit on the Homeless Provider Network Committee for the city, and our connection with Concord PD and supporting these families has also increased as well. So
Yeah, it's a different beast.
it is. It even 5, 6, 7 years ago, it's very much changed.
And we, a lot of times I've been in social work for over 20 years. You see a lot of overlap in efforts and services. So part of the assessment as well is who are you already working with? Is there a open DCYF assessment? Or have you already been connected to CAP? Have you gone to city welfare yet? Do you need somebody to go with you to fill out that application? We can't assume that all our families are literate, or maybe they need a translator. So those are the kind of, closed loop connections and referrals that we're making. We're not just saying, here's a phone number, go call this person, because there often are just more barriers, Bring in all your birth certificates and your last 5 tax returns, You're living in a car, you don't have that stuff.
Right.
One of the other things that McKinney-Vento allows us to do as a district is to help them get vital documentation. If they don't have a birth certificate, it's $10 online, but they, we can help them get that. I worked with a lot of students last year that ended up they might have just fallen off the radar and between the cracks and not graduated because they were struggling, and McKinney-Vento, probably a correlation there. So they ended up going to either the HiSET to get their GED or the Second Star programming. But the HiSET, in order to take the test, you have to have a valid state ID. A lot of our students do not have that. They don't have a driver's license. They can't afford to take driver's ed. So that's another thing that we can help them do, or the DMV, and get a non-driver. Again, $10, but that's a lot of money to some people.
The documentation and the paperwork is, I'm helping my mother with my father in a nursing home, and the amount of paper. I was 15 years in special ed. Talk about a lot of paper, right? There's a form for everything you do, and I'm overwhelmed by it. And I think, how does some poor 85-year-old woman with no support manage all this? What's a real ID? He doesn't have a license anymore. What do I do now? And I think, here's a situation with all the support, and now we're asking people who don't remember, all their stuff is who knows where.
Or they're trying to fill out a form on their phone.
Right.
That really, it's hard to see on your phone. You need a
Right.
laptop, so they can come in and we can put
Right,
them on a laptop. And I'm glad you mentioned special education. Obviously, that's part of one of the first questions we ask, is the student identified? And then we would loop in the special education director and Dawn and everything to see.
Because there's another whole thread of
to make
service
sure,
connections.
that's might add another layer
yeah.
of support that these students need for instruction.
Kara?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Thank you guys so much
thank you.
for the work that you do. I'm curious if there's an age limit for qualifying for McKinney-Vento services.
Good question. As long as they are a full-time student, and even if they turn 18 during their senior year or whatever year, they can continue. Special ed students would still be up to 22. Yeah.
Okay, great. And when somebody qualifies for McKinney-Vento, does that qualify the district for any extra funding from state or federal resources? Or is the sort of transportation, social service, all the work and money that we put into that student, is it aided by becoming qualified for McKinney-Vento?
Absolutely. There's federal McKinney-Vento money.
Yeah. And that just gets reported out every year?
Yes, so I communicate with Christy Dodson, who is the McKinney-Vento coordinator for the state at the DOE. And I communicate with her monthly, but every so many months she'll ask for kind of a roster head count, just to make sure that her records match what we have.
Yeah.
But like John said, we do seek cost share agreements for, families that are transporting.
Yeah.
So that this year, the process, I've kind of tweaked it a little bit better, so it's a little bit more organized, and so that we're sending out invoices and seeking that cost back.
Good. Thank you.
We also had a 3-year, it ends this year, a 3-year grant that we, actually 3.5 years it was, because I wrote my first year here, for McKinney-Vento. And it would really help fund a portion of Erin's position to really help get us going and support some district-wide homeless coordination. It just wasn't here before that.
Yeah.
So
Are we
that's
re-upping that grant?
it's not offered right now. We're
come
looking for
on.
other grants. Are
Yeah.
I mean,
coming
anything
through.
that's out there, we'll go for it. Stacy
Yeah.
Lazar just earned a grant for us. What organization was it? I can't remember.
I know. I'm gonna
But
remember
they
the second
gave us a
one.
grant, so each building has $200 to spend. Because there's a process for requesting things. Like I have a student who got into CRTC, but he needs steel-toed boots to do the auto mechanics. So that was something we could support with, but it took a couple weeks for the whole, But when a student comes in and they need socks and underwear, you're not going to ask them to wait 2 weeks. So we have that ability. We also do take advantage of any donations. Every building has a closet where we can just go and access something immediately.
So this past winter, I did a really big clothing drive here, and we filled the attic here, and we were able to get brand new coats for these kids, clothes. I mean, one community member was just so kind. I don't even know the amount of clothing and brand new shoes that these kids need. And so it's nice now where the social workers will be like, oh, Erin, we've got a family that's been displaced. They're in a tent tonight. It's like, all right, let's raid this and see
Yeah.
what we can have. And that family has
Or-
coats
yeah.
and everything that they need for the next.
And we do get support sometimes unexpectedly. I had a church reach out
Yes.
to me last year, and they said, we want to help the homeless students of Concord. We've been reading these articles in the paper, and what can we do? And one of the things we're not able to fund with McKinney-Vento money is gas cards, but that's often the difference between a kid getting to school for a whole week or not. So I said, can I have some gas cards? And he gave us like $1,000.
It was
It was
amazing.
amazing. And so I was able to share those with all the buildings, and they were just $20 each, but at least that's a start. That's a little something for them.
So I'm just going to piggyback. There's a program at Concord High School. It's my neighbor. She's a teacher up there, and she started it's the Crimson Closet. So it's
Yes,
a
Jen?
so Jen, yeah. So
I worked there with her.
We've been best friends for 25 years.
Oh, nice.
We live on the same street, but
Yep.
so that program has taken off
Yes.
in terms of and she'll reach out for a specific thing, like the steel toe boot issue.
Yep.
That reach out could have provided 10 pairs of boots. Like there's
Yep.
these are people that we need to loop in. The other thing Concord High has now is in every commons is a locker. It's the red locker, and it's all feminine hygiene products and a
That's
change of
that with
underwear,
Jen as well.
all that kind of stuff, which
So
is
we
just
communicate with Jen often.
yeah. Oh, I'm
if-
glad. That's good to know. It
there's
just
a
makes
certain
perfect
size
sense.
that we need,
Yeah.
and maybe the student doesn't want to go during this actual school day. Jen
Right.
will stay late.
Yep.
She'll open the
Yep.
closet up, so
Yep.
it feels just like a normal shopping
Yeah,
experience.
yeah.
It doesn't need
Beautiful,
to be.
too.
One of the
it's
greatest
humbling, and
one of the
it's-
greatest side effects of that, listening to Jen talk about it. I had them on my podcast. I had her and some students on
nice.
just to,
Oh,
we
wonderful.
recorded at the high school. It was great, but anyone can go in there. So she said, you get kids that come in that don't need free clothes, but they find something they like. They come back a week later with a giant bag full of all their Abercrombie and whatever it is they wear. Here, I have all this, and suddenly it's just this total balancing out and removing all that
I
stigma.
mean, it's also obviously environmentally conscious, but
Yeah.
we were able to get a whole classroom size room now. So the other piece, like you said, is it's not just for McKinney-Vento students. Anyone can go in there. Teachers can go in there.
But
And
it
I have
makes those
teachers come in
connections,
and
yeah.
they shop, and then they
Yeah.
bring in stuff, and kids will come in and say, how does this work? How much does this cost?
Yeah, no,
It's
no.
free.
Yeah.
So, I think they love it. It's open during lunches, and they come in
amazing.
and shop, and
Yeah.
Very nice.
it's fun.
So great.
Yeah.
Great. A couple of the questions I had focused, I think, a little bit more on the learning aspects of this, and I don't mean for them to come across as insensitive. It's just I'm trying to focus it on the educational part because I find all this other stuff so important too. One question that I had is, do the students and families that qualify for McKinney-Vento have a say if they become homeless in Concord, but now are in another city or another town? Do they have a say about whether they would prefer to go to school in that town?
Yes, that's the best
the best
interest
interest.
determination. Yep.
So they would have a choice to
Absolutely,
say, yes, we
yes.
think we're going to stay here, and
Right.
Concord is not going to be on.
And I think it's really important to emphasize, we're having those discussions with families, so they're not coming to a meeting going, well, what's this meeting about?
Great.
We're very transparent on, we want your input, we want the child's input. are they connected here, or do they have friends here? Do they
play a sport?
Do they play a
Yeah.
sport? Like, there's so much that goes into those discussions.
And the services would stay with the kids if they chose to live in the town?
Of course.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yes. Yep. And that's the discussion that we would have. Say the family goes, it makes sense. We'll go to Deerfield, or we'll go to
Right.
Manchester.
I mean, it's really less services and more support
Yeah,
and
right,
rights.
okay.
I've discovered, this is my 9th year of doing McKinney-Vento work, and I've discovered that there are a lot of districts that aren't very versed in the law. Every district has to have a liaison. That's, I think, the state law. But a lot of times it's like, oh, you're a guidance counselor, well, you're also going to take this over. And for districts that have 1 or 2 per year, it's probably not a big deal. But then you find districts that they have no idea that they have any obligation or whatever. They don't go to these trainings. So they're not keeping up on it, and they don't have an errand. So that makes it a little more complicated. But we have a good handle on things.
Yeah, and sometimes it's education, and it's talking to another director about education, about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because, I think we all work together and we try to do that.
And if that happens and a family decides to stay in their new town, does the responsibility for the student switch from Concord to that town, or? Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
All right. I know we've had, the transportation costs have become
Ridiculous?
incredibly ridiculous
Yeah.
over the last year or so, and I know of situations where we've been transporting students from as far away as Plymouth daily, and does the federal money cover the transportation, or, because it seems like our transportation costs have gone up grossly over the last few years, and I didn't know whether you receive enough support from the government, the federal government, for this program to
above my
cover
pay
those?
grade.
The answer
not.
is some are local funds.
Yeah.
The like some come from, like I said, grants and federal grants and be able to do that, but some do exceed that. And
So
we
the
have
federal
to.
government doesn't cover this program?
No, entirely no.
And we do try to get creative whenever we can about transportation.
And we understand that it's a necessity, and
It's a-
and I'm not looking for us to say we won't,
Right.
we can't do it, or
Right.
anything, wouldn't
Right.
do it, but just, I was hoping that the government would fund it.
It's and again, for the government's point of view, it's like I said, our number fluctuates. So it could be 112, it could be 130. It depends on. Right now, we've
Wintertime, we tend to see a lot more.
wintertime. I see a lot more. Right now, it's kind of slow, but it spikes and it valleys, and
We have a
It's
big
kinda
surge
one of
in
those things,
August,
yeah.
September,
Yeah.
big surge
Yeah.
in December, January.
and most of your federal money for programs like this, for anything special ed, anything else, it's based on 2 years ago.
Okay.
So all of our ADA money, all of our Title I money,
So they're not looking at it in real time?
nothing's real time with
And
the
that's
federal
been a
government.
discussion that we've brought up with the Department of Ed. I've had conversations with multiple districts talking about their point in time count, and it's not reflective.
It's once a year.
It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
sure on this given day, but 24 hours later we see a huge spike. So
It would be helpful if they'd even look at your previous year's highest number and based it on that.
Right, a running average.
Right.
really, rather
Doesn't.
than a point in
Right.
time.
How many students do we currently have?
as of this morning, my count was at 86.
Still a lot. Still a lot.
And that'll increase.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
that
had a
is
huge
very-
surge, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
We had a huge surge during COVID. There was they couldn't evict people, and so people were able to stay. And then as soon as that was lifted, a lot of people were then unhoused. The city can put people up in a hotel, but then that doesn't last forever, right? And some of them make you move week to week. You can only stay there for a week and then get pre-approved, or you have to move to another hotel. So obviously still very disruptive. But we did see a big surge after that was lifted, that eviction ban was lifted.
And one last question that I had is there research, I understand the idea of not wanting to have students who are also facing so many other disruptions in their life to have a school disruption, but is there research that shows it's really in their best interest to stay in their first school district, if you will, rather than go to where they're living currently? I worry about attendance. I worry about, what are the attendance issues for students.
Those are all
that
the factors we
There
look
is
at.
research, but yeah, it's very case by case. I mean, if you're looking at transporting a kindergartner for 45 minutes each way,
From Keene to
not
Concord,
gonna make
that doesn't
sense,
make
right?
sense.
Okay.
but for so many of these students, being in school is the only stability they have. It is the only warmth, meals, people caring about them, nurturing, accountability, learning. So in those situations, then
No, I totally understand. I guess what I'm thinking is if you're using, I like the Keene to Concord because that is such a distance
Yeah.
and not easy to get to. Wouldn't it be better for that student who's now in Keene to be going to school in Keene because you're going to be there more often? It's easier to get to. Your food's going to be more,
But I
rather
think,
than
like,
driving
again,
back
case
and
by
forth.
Those
case.
are, if
Yeah.
it's a kindergartner, does it really make the most sense for
So you
a-
look at the student as a whole.
100%.
That's
if it's a
100%.
senior at Concord High and we're
Yeah.
going,
and they have 2 months left, we're gonna
have those. I mean, we look at everything.
Okay.
And you can
That's really
call,
helpful. Thank you.
and they can call, so often we do, if, you know, when I typically get involved, I'll look at Erin and I'll say, and she goes, should I call another bid meeting? And I'll say, mm-hmm. And she knows the answer before she comes to see me, but I usually have to kind of have the conversation, and it's always like, yep, this situation's changed, or it hasn't improved, or it's gotten worse. And in any of those cases, I'll say, call another bid meeting, and we'll get both districts together in the room, along with anyone else that we need, and we'll re-talk about it. Sometimes there's kids we have 3 or 4 a year on, just to kind of, it's not really working, and we're trying to find the best solution for it.
We had a tough one last. I would say there aren't, not at least the high school. We had maybe a couple of bid meetings last year. There was a student who was staying in Manchester and was a new student to us at the beginning of the year, and even with providing transportation, her attendance was terrible. She wasn't engaging in classes. She wasn't even going to classes. She was really struggling. She'd been obviously had trauma for a long time. And so we did have a bid meeting and said that we thought it would be better if she went where she was living. And the parents did challenge it, and they appealed to the superintendent, who upheld the decision, and then they went to the state, who upheld their decision. So, there are situations where what was the benefit to that student staying here, right? She wasn't engaged in sports. She didn't have a job here. She wasn't going to classes. So in that case, in some ways, Manchester might have been able to offer more for her because she probably needed an alternative educational situation.
That, I love hearing that. That's what it should all be about. So thank you so
100%,
much.
yeah.
Anything else?
No.
I'm thinking about, you may have heard, we're building a new middle school.
Oh,
I think I saw some signs.
interesting.
I saw some signs.
And
I won't say anything.
I am curious, we engaged a lot of students, families, employees on the design of the new middle school. Is there something that you would like to see in the design that you maybe haven't already seen, or that you think would be most accommodating to families in need? Or
That's a great question. I think what the success comes down to is a connection with a caring adult, a point person for that student. So maybe nothing physical, but having somebody that is from the day they come in the door, because they're not just a new student in a huge scary building where they don't know anyone. They're a student who has such a, uncertain situation. So I think it's the connection with somebody in the building.
Gotcha. I mean, I've heard somebody had suggested a laundromat, somebody had suggested a larger care closet, things like that. Are those things that
I mean, I'll never say no
you're
to
like,
space.
yes,
Sorry, my voice is right there.
I've known some schools that do have laundry for McKinney-Vento students. I don't know if it's
Which can be
Right.
tricky
yeah,
with that.
because who ends up going and switching the laundry and then folding it during the middle of the day?
The nurse or you?
Not the kids. And my
No,
own
because they're in
home
class.
tennis. Yeah, and that's what made me curious is, I think to your point that it's really just the access to people that can give you the resources that you need, and not necessarily building out facilities. That
Right.
can
I mean, I love that
shelter
idea.
environment.
In fact, I think they should bring back home ec, and every kid should learn how to do their laundry. But
I think,
but
to
I'm
go
with
back
you.
to the creativity that, when I joined this role, it was, Erin, you want to learn to be a bus driver. Like, I went and got my bus driver certification as a means to help transport with our outreach van. So the effort is there. It's just got to keep doing it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, and everyone that, Barb, I think you got one too. I mentioned that I oversee our family center. So I wanted you all to have one of our new bags as part of our PDG funds that sadly went away, which we were able to use a lot of those funds to increase our home visiting and our family center programming. So we just wanted you to have that to continue to remember all the work we're doing with all our families.
Well, thank you again, and if you guys do find that you need anything in your program and the board is able to help in any way, please don't hesitate to come through John or Kim or come back to us and say,
Thank
listen,
you.
we could really use this.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. We have nothing further on our agenda for this evening, so if I'm not seeing any other discussions, I guess we could call it a meeting. And we would, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Anyone in favor? A second?
Yeah, I
Like,
gotta have a
everyone in
second. Look at
favor?
you wanting to get out of
I
here.
know, right? Aye.
Thank you.
All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
I'm really glad you guys work with Jess.